Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. It's Ben McCormick here with Clinton Weaver for another episode. We're going to talk about, we're a little bit late. We're a little bit late to the party, but we're talking Duke, Arizona State. And there's a lot of positive things to talk about when you're talking about this game. For me, my experience with it is, well, my girlfriend and I actually, we go to this thing called the Red and White Ball at NC State every year. And so we went to that, and that was actually at the same time as the game. So I left that, and I went and I put the game on and watched it afterwards. But I was keeping up with the score as I was away from the screen. And at first, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're up 10. And then I was like, oh, 20, wow, okay, that's pretty good. And then eventually I check it, and I'm like, they've got them doubled up, like 68-34. And I was like, wow. And then eventually it gets to a 60-point lead, and I'm thinking, I got to get back and watch this game. Like, what has gone on that they're up 60 points on another Power 5 school, a school that, by the way, a potential tournament team, a team that got votes in the preseason top 25 for whatever that means, if that means literally anything. But they got somebody voted for them. Somebody thought that was a top 25 team. And Duke made them look like a Division II team, quite frankly. And that was very impressive for a lot of reasons. But Clinton, I want to get your perspective on it as someone who didn't just watch it after everybody else. So bring me into to Cameron and talk to me a little bit about that game.
Well, there was not a lot not to like about that performance. I was there, yes. The Iron Dukes gave me what they considered an upgrade, but I'm not so sure. I was right underneath the crow's nest, and I got to speak to Corey Alexander. Had a nice view of his backside up there in the crow's nest, but good vantage point near center court. So, this was one of those stress-free ball games, especially the second half when they laid 66 points on them. And the kind of game that my wife enjoys when she doesn't have to worry about the outcome whatsoever.
Well, let's talk about that first half. First of all, I think that, going back and watching that game, that the first half for Duke was honestly not really that impressive to me. I thought it was a kind of average performance they put out in the first half. They didn't quite have that scrap to them yet. They were taking decent shots, just not making them. And so they had 37 in the first half, which is, not bad, but it's not like fantastic either. And so watching that, I was like, if they did that against Kansas in the first half, they'd be trailing that game at the half. But quite frankly, what happened was Arizona State played so poorly that somehow that half led to a 16-point lead. And I don't know if you were thinking as critically about that first half as I was. I wasn't terribly impressed. Not like it was bad. I don't think they played poorly, but I wasn't extremely impressed. And so at halftime, I was thinking, well, man, what goes down in this second to produce what goes on for the rest of this game? I mean, what were your impressions of the first half?
Well, it all kind of gets washed away by the second half,
Yeah.
And, everybody's global takeaways are that Duke was fantastic. But you're right. They definitely had a slow start. I think they were 3 of 11 from 3 in the first half. What amazes me is the pace at which they are taking three-pointers. So, still 34 for the game after 30-some in the previous game. So it looks like they're going to be chucking up a lot of threes, and when they don't go in, they're not going to look very good. But when they go in, like they did in the second half, then all of a sudden they look like world beaters. And that's what everybody remembers, of course, is the second half.
Yeah, well, John's talked about wanting to play with that pace. He's talked about wanting Duke to look as much like an NBA team as it possibly can. And so I think that he's definitely succeeding so far in replicating that style of play. The three-pointers, the quick pace, that kind of thing. and he's somewhat replicating in what you see in the NBA, which is a little bit of a streakiness from quarter to quarter in the NBA, where 20-point leads get erased with ease in the NBA. That's not the case in college. I think this Duke team could be a team that at points during the season might dig some holes for itself, especially in first halves, because so far we've seen that maybe they're not the strongest first half team. I mean, we have a really small sample size, but in 2 games so far, 2 kind of unimpressive first halves, followed up by 2 monumental second halves. And so I think that there's a possibility, because they play this NBA style of basketball that is so dependent upon its three-point shooting, that they might dig some holes for themselves. And I think this team, more than any of the ones we've seen in recent history, might be able to get its way out of it with more ease than others in the past. Usually if you're down 15 in college basketball, I mean, not all the time, but most of the time, you can go ahead and dig the grave. Like, you're taking one on the chin if you're down 15. And every once in a while, you get a comeback from that deficit. But I think this team, because at the end of the day, what I saw in that second half, I mean, there was that one stretch where Con Knipple just drills like 4 threes just out of nowhere. And so if you can put together stretches like that consistently, 15-point leads can go away in the blink of an eye. And that's what you see in the NBA. A 15-point lead doesn't mean a lot until the very end of the game. And so this Duke team, a little bit more like an NBA team than any we've seen before. Not necessarily just because of talent, but because of that inherent play style that John seems to be going after.
Right. Well, if they're shooting 34 threes and making 17 and hanging up 103 points in 40 minutes, that is an NBA pace.
Yeah.
And 6 guys were in double figures. Everybody was making threes. It wasn't just Con, it was everybody. I was really pleasantly surprised to see Sion had a nice stroke from outside, and to have 6 guys in double figures and one of them is not named Cooper Flagg is pretty incredible. Of course, Cooper only played 21 minutes, so and we still beat him by 60 points. So it was pretty funny listening to Bobby Hurley after the game, talking about the beatdown that his team had just taken, and he didn't mince his words at all. He called it a train wreck, and he said, we got our ass kicked. And then he said, hats off to where they are, and oh shit about where we are. And then he said, that's why I've never wanted to come back here. It's like I lost 2 games here or something. We used to do this to everybody. So he used to be on the giving end and didn't like coming back and being on the receiving end.
Yeah, poor Bobby, man. I mean, he genuinely said, and I don't know if he meant this or it just slipped out of his mouth, but he called it his last time in Cameron. And, well, who can blame him if that's the truth after what just occurred? I'm sure he loves Duke and everything, but getting handed a 56-point loss as a Power 5 school, and look, I know that it's an exhibition game, and, I tweeted something very similar, but it's a Power 5 school. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen one Power 5 beat another Power 5 as handily as Duke did against Arizona State. And that's got to mean something. I mean, I will say that I think this Arizona State team in its current state is pretty sorry, honestly. But, I think Bobby will get them looking better by the end of the year. But it's got to be a little difficult not to be discouraged if you're Bobby Hurley and if you're an Arizona State fan. But silver lining for Arizona State, their best player is Jaden Quaidance, and he is 17 years old. So, well, and some people might say, well, so's Cooper Flagg. He's 17 years old as well. But Jaden turned 17 3 months ago. Like, he was 16 years old a month before school started. He is by far the youngest player in college basketball and literally cannot even enter the NBA draft as a one and done. He's too young. He has to play at least 2 seasons. So that, I think that when you look at it like that, you kind of understand this Arizona State team a little bit more. much younger. Just while Duke hasn't had the experience together, and yes, they have a lot of freshmen, I think that Duke has experienced players like Sion and Mason and Malik who are helping them kind of put up this this, I don't want to say facade, but well, because it isn't a facade. I mean, they actually are an older team, and so they have that advantage over them. I'm talking myself in circles, but I'm trying to explain to explain why Arizona State sucks.
Yeah, they're young, and their star players are very young. So hopefully the kid from Raleigh will stick around for a couple of years and help Bobby keep his job.
You know, when they talked about Bobby being at Arizona State for 10 years, that seemed unbelievable. That seemed like it had to be wrong to me when they said that. It doesn't feel like he's been there that long. Is that something similar, or am I just losing it?
Well, I don't know. I live in a time warp all the time, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask. It seems like only yesterday that he was helping us win the national championship.
Yeah, well, he might be helping us win the national championship this year too by boosting confidence potentially. Let's talk a little bit more about Duke's performance. Getting away from Arizona State, who hopefully does not crash and burn this season. Let's talk about Cooper. You brought Cooper up. You know, I had a buddy of mine text me after the game talking about, you know, how he was surprised that Cooper only had 9 points. He's like, I don't want to say that, you know, like he's overrated or anything, but am I right in thinking that, like, what's going on here? So I pretty much told him, I said, he's a kind of guy that's going to shoot as much as Duke needs him to shoot. If he needs to shoot 4 times for Duke to win, he'll shoot 4 times for Duke to win. He needs to shoot 20 times for him to win. That's what he'll do. And frankly, I don't think Duke needed him to do a whole lot against Arizona State. And yet he still made an impact. 3 assists, 4 rebounds, defended well. And like you said, he didn't really play a ton, you know, comparatively to how much he's going to usually. And I recently also saw an opinion column written by the Chronicle that was talking about, you know, how people are drawing the comparisons to Zion Williamson and how those are unfair. And we've talked about those before. But I do urge people that first big game that Cooper Flagg has, like against maybe Kentucky or Kansas or Arizona, where he doesn't score 10 points. Let's not go, oh, see, he's overrated. Shouldn't be the first pick. We need to look a little deeper than that. I think he's a player that's just he's gonna do what's necessary to win. And I think that's honestly what's beautiful about him as that high profile of a player.
He came out with tremendous energy. He was just attacking the rim like a madman. And the thing I like about Cooper is, well, first of all, I have to say, if he had 9 points in 20 minutes, that's 18 in 40 minutes, right? So that is not exactly, so bad. That's not low output. We tend to focus on the scoring, but he's also a facilitator. And the thing that I really like that this team is really going to benefit from is people are going to put their focus on him, not just the fans, but the opposing team and coach. And they're going to game plan for him. And that's just going to free things up for everybody else. And Cooper is exactly the kind of guy who's smart enough to take advantage of that. And when you look at, I know this was just one game, but when you look at the stat sheet and what everybody else was doing all around him, you know, you had Sion 3 out of 4 from 3, Khan 4 out of 8 from 3, Caleb 3 out of 5 from 3, Gillis 2 out of 3 from 3, Harris 2 out of 5 from 3, Proctor 2 out of 3 from 3. That was a very impressive box score. So if, you know, Cooper is facilitating for those guys and they're able to spot up or come off of a pick like Khan seems to know how to do perfectly, that works, man. I'll take it every day of the week.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. or you can DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network to DM at Duke_Wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
So here's my question kind of about that 3-point shooting. Obviously spectacular in the Arizona State game. Like you mentioned, the shooting splits. My question is that a sustainable play style for this team to win a national title without, and there's a big asterisk here, but without a low post presence that is, as of right now, a reliably consistent offensive presence? Because right now, I believe in Kaman Malawach to become a player that teams are going to have to game plan for on the offensive end. I'm not so sure that he has that impact right now. And so the hypothetical that I'm proposing is basically just like, if he still looks like this offensively in March, which I think is highly unlikely, but if he did, is the way Duke's playing right now, is that sustainable for a national championship winning team? Can they win a title playing the way they do right now?
I think so. I'm not really worried about that at all. I mean, Malawach had 8 points and 12 rebounds and 2 blocks. That was a beautiful stat line.
Yeah.
He doesn't really need to do anything more than he was doing the other night. You know, he was throwing it down with authority, beautiful dunks. You know, he was swatting the opponent's shots and deterring them from even thinking about coming into the lane on defense. And I mean, with everybody else that we have on this team, that's all he needs to do. You know, he doesn't need, I mean, John may want him to be a 3-point threat, so he has to be guarded on the perimeter, but that's not really what we need from man. And, you know, Malik Brown needs to be able to step out and hit a 3 so he doesn't become the next Mark Mitchell on the team. But in terms of Malawach, I think what he's giving us right now is exactly what this team needs.
I think that I've been wonderfully impressed by his rebounding. So a lot of the time when you get a really skinny freshman like that, he's not necessarily the most, I guess, audacious or outward hustler and rebounder. Kind of, it doesn't do the dirty work necessarily, but Malawach absolutely does. I think he prides himself, in fact, on being a high-level rebounder, and so that is something that I love. Like, if he's pulling down 11, 12 rebounds a game, that would be a game changer. Just an absolute nightmare for opponents. The only reason I bring up the hypothetical that I brought up is because, you know, we've talked about so much the NBA game comparison for Duke, but what you see in college more than in the NBA is I think you need a dominant or a really reliable big man to win a national title. Most of the time. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but just looking like years past, Donovan Clingan last year for UConn, Sonogo the year prior for the Huskies, and then like David McCormack was pretty good for Kansas as well. He's certainly a very reliable player. And so for me, I think that Kaman is going to be the X factor for Duke this year if they're going to be a national championship team. Like, I think that you probably know you're going to get good guard play in March. I think you know that Kahn and Cooper, if healthy, they're going to be doing what they're going to do. But for me, it's like, where's the one guy that we're not exactly sure? And if he does show up, I think that everyone in the country is going to have a really, really tough time taking the sixth banner out of Cameron Indoor Stadium if Malawach shows up in March. And that's why I think that he's the biggest X factor. I think that might be the biggest question mark for Duke.
I think he showed a lot of improvement just from game 1 to game 2. I'm impressed with how he moves his feet and just how he's picking up the game so quickly. And he's a talker out there. He's going to be, he reminds me of Lively in a lot of ways, you know, because he can move his feet and he is a talker, which is so important on defense. And I think he's He's going to be just what the doctor ordered. I understand your concern about a 3-point shooting team. You live by the 3, you die by the 3. And there could be that night in March, where nobody's making it. But with a team that's 10 deep, everybody can't go cold at the same time,
You would hope not, right?
You just got to find the right guy and put him in the game.
Yeah. Well, I'm to be honest, I'm really just playing devil's advocate a little bit here because I believe in Kaman Malawach. I mean, he literally might be my favorite player on the team. I have a lot of belief in that guy, and I think that he's going to do wonderful things. But I think it's important to kind of discuss where weaknesses might come up as the season progresses, because it's really easy, I think, to get in this kind of habit in the preseason games where you're like, well, this looks great, and this looks great, and this looks great. Because, if we had this podcast episode the day after Duke beat Kentucky by 34 points in fall of 2018, we'd probably be talking about, like, yeah, of course this team's going to win the national title. But as the season progresses, you have this play style that other teams weren't ready for to begin with, but you give them a month or two to game plan it, and all of a sudden it's not as effective anymore. Now, I will say that 2018-19 team comparison to this year has its flaws and a one-to-one comparison, because that team really had 3.5 offensive weapons with Zion, RJ, Cam, and like sometimes Trey Jones. But like you said, this team has 10 offensive weapons, and that is what sets it apart in a lot of ways. And that's why I'm so excited about this team, is because of its diversity of weapons. And I think it is different than any team we've seen in the past. I get into a habit of trying to compare every Duke team to another Duke team, but I think that's difficult to do for this one.
Yeah, well, the depth is stronger than I can recall it being in the past. I think we all have to pull ourselves up a little short at this point and remember that they've played 2 exhibition games, So let's get a little further down the road. We got 2 more cupcakes coming up with Maine and Army, which should be W's, and then we got a little bit of a gauntlet to run over the course of the next 4 after that. So maybe we all need to regroup after another 6 games or so and see if we're still frothing at the mouth the way we are right now.
Well, Maine's playing psychological warfare with us. They got a commitment from Cooper's brother just right before we play him. That's kind of messed up, the timing of that, right?
Well, I wish that Ace could be there Monday night. That would be fun. Flag on flag, I've heard of flag football. This would be flag basketball. That would be kind of fun.
That would be good. I'm sure that Kelly, their mother, would eat that up. But fortunately, Ace still sticking it out in high school for 1 more year, so I'm not so sure that we'll get to play against him unless we make this the Duke Maine Classic, sort of a yearly thing. But I somehow doubt that.
Maybe Cooper will be a flop and he'll still be here next year, and then we can have the flag matchup.
Well, if Cooper's a flop, then I'm going to nip those national title conversations right now. That's not happening if we get a dud from Cooper. Let's run down another player I want to talk about. I mean, we've talked about him plenty, but Con Knippel, just a terrific game. But what I really want to bring up about Con is sort of the slight disrespect he received by ESPN this week in their top 100 college basketball players. And I just kept looking down at that list, and I was like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Until finally you get down to 97, and he's 97th? Did they make this list 2 months ago? I mean, what's going on with that?
Maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. Somebody's not paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, well, the other shocking thing about that list is not just that he's 97th, but somehow Duke only has one player ranked in the top 65, because the second highest is Tyrese Proctor at 66. I don't love that. I don't think that's true at all. Like, that pretty much implies that Duke is nowhere even close to having a second All-American on this roster, which I think is far from the truth.
Well, I mean, Khan, I think, is probably most likely to be the guy who's going to be in consideration for, like, lottery, first round, high first round pick. Well, Malawach also potentially, the way, depending on how it pans out. We could have three guys go lottery, with Cooper, Khan, and Malawach, I think, out of what I've seen so far. It's hard to resist a 7'2" guy with a 7'6" wingspan. So, and then Khan is showing, one guy who was doing film breakdown on YouTube compared him to JJ Redick with the way he can come off of a screen ready to shoot. And I think that's a fair comparison from what I've seen so far.
Yeah. With even more size, which is kind of the crazy part. And then talking about Kaman, I've seen draft boards. He started the year probably around like 4th or 5th. Like, I mean, by started the year, I mean like the beginning of the summer. And now I've seen him slip down to like around 12 or 13. And these draft boards still meaningless. It's not even November yet. But to me, right, if you're considering the 6th pick or so in the draft and he's still on the board, take him. Like, you cannot let that guy go down to 13. I don't think I've ever seen a prospect since maybe Joel Embiid, who more obviously is going to be significantly better as a professional basketball player than he is as a college basketball player. Come on, if that dude's still on the draft board past like the 5th or 6th pick, then these NBA teams are just kidding themselves. And in my mind, I don't even know if I need to see that much more improvement from him this season to know that he should be a top 6 or 7 pick just off of his intangibles alone, honestly.
Well, didn't Lively go around 12 or 13 to Dallas? So,
yes.
Yeah, and there are a lot of teams right now that are saying, damn, I should have taken him, just based on 1 year. And so it's a similar situation. Don't want to sleep on him.
Yeah. So one more thing about that list that I would be remiss if I didn't mention is the fact that Mr. R.J. Davis was second, and our 17-year-old freshman was ranked ahead of him, even though he's a returning first-team All-American. I'm not making any assertions whether that's true or not, like whether Cooper's actually better than him, but I just know that that's going to get under Carolina fans' skin, so I had to say it.
Like, I really care about that. I mean, Flag obviously belongs way ahead of RJ, who's probably not even going to be in the pros after his college career is over. So no comparison there between number 1 and number 2. And, let people sleep on Duke is what I have to say. We're ranked number 7. We're underrated at number 7. Yeah. This is championship caliber material that we got here, and everybody is justifiably excited about it.
Well, we exist partly to annoy Carolina. I think that's part of the reason for this podcast's existence. And so that's, so we do that every once in a while. We had a good time with that last week, actually. But let's I want to talk about one more guy. Well, actually, 2, because I'm going to make a brief mention of the fact that Spencer Hubbard has scored in 2 consecutive basketball games, which deserves praise, I think. And then on that walk-on note, we won by 56 points and Stanley Borden didn't play.
Yeah, I noticed that. You would think he could get into this one.
My strongly worded email to John Shire is being drafted as we speak. I can't. It's unfathomable to me in a game that does not count toward a regular season record that you win by 56 points, and that man couldn't get 1 second on the floor, and when he scored the previous game, nonetheless,
Yeah, one of Hurley's quotes afterwards was, "One of the best things I can say is that we're still 0-0 after this ball game because it didn't count." And right. Yeah, you would think Stanley could get into one of those don't count kind of games where you're up 60 on the opponent.
I'm glad that he got that bucket. I really am against Lincoln, but it's he needs to get a bucket in a real regular season game. So John, as always, when I address you because you're listening, if Duke wins by 50 against Maine on Monday, you have to promise me that Stanley Borden will enter the game for at least 1 full minute. That's enough time to give him at least one offensive possession where he might get a shot opportunity. We need it. Everybody needs it. Duke faithful needs it. Stanley Borden, quite frankly, needs it, I think. And so let's make it happen, John. We get another 50-point win. Stanley Borden plays. Let's make a deal.
Well, here's the upside of him not playing. He's currently averaging 2 points per game.
That's pretty good.
If he plays in another game without scoring, his average gets cut in half. So we need to keep his average propped up at 2.0.
Yeah, that's the silver lining. He's definitely not the lowest scorer on the team, and That's pretty good. That's a pretty good silver lining. The guy that I originally, when I said let's talk about one more player, I was not thinking of Stanley Borden in the moment. My mind just naturally wanders to Stanley Borden, I think. But the guy I actually wanted to talk about, and you mentioned him earlier, was Sion James, a guy that hit 3 3-pointers, played terrifically, and I said something to my brother recently where I was like, if Sion James can get 16 points in any game, I think Duke automatically wins that game. I think, and I called Kaman Malawach the biggest X factor for this Duke team, but I believe one tiny step below him in that category is Sion. I think this is a guy that if he can offensively produce in any given game, he makes Duke the toughest team, or as tough as anybody else in the country to beat. Would you agree with that?
I was really pleasantly surprised to see how he could knock down threes. He also had 3 assists. And he's got a big body. Nobody moves him. He moves other people. He's incredibly strong. But despite being so strong, you might think, well, maybe he's going to shoot bricks, with that kind of muscular build. But no, he showed me something in that game that not only is he strong, but he's got a nice touch. And so he could definitely be an X factor in terms of how the team performs. Senior leadership, older guy. And as you mentioned earlier, the team has several of those. I was also impressed with the way Brown played, even though he got into foul trouble, and I don't think he registered on the scoreboard. He has incredible hands, and he was picking guys' pockets left and right, and the refs were calling ticky-tack fouls. So we got a lot of guys like that. Gillis impressed me also, before he really hadn't, but he showed me something in this game. He went 4 out of 6 and hit 2 out of 3 from 3. He had 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Everybody was stuffing this stat sheet like crazy, and including those older guys.
Yeah, really, really impressed by Mason. I was hoping that 3-point shooting would come through eventually. I've expressed a little bit of skepticism about just how true that 47% 3-point percentage from Purdue will look this season, but I think that he's definitely going to be a guy that has his games where he hits 2 or 3 3-pointers, and that ends up being huge for Duke in those games. And so I'm looking forward to having him, and obviously Malik just as a defensive menace. I think Duke has a chance at having 3 players of the 5 on the All-ACC defensive team. I honestly do, because I think Kaman Malawach is going to be up for that. Cooper Flagg's going to be up for that. Malik Brown's going to be up for that. And that's without even mentioning the fact that Tyrese Proctor probably has a pretty good case as well. And maybe even Sion James. I mean, there's so many players on this team that could end up on that. It's kind of crazy. But from the highest of highs and a 56-point victory, let's talk about a 1-point loss. A beyond frustrating 1-point loss that, quite frankly, I got media credentials to go to, did not go to, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because this game was just infuriating to watch. for so many reasons. But Clinton, talk to me about your impressions about Duke football's 28-27 loss to Southern Methodist University.
Well, as I texted you afterward, it was a classic case of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, we had done so much. The defense was so outstanding. Everybody talks about, you know, losing the game with 6 turnovers, but I count actually 10 because there were 3 more fumbles that we didn't recover, and then 1 more interception that got nullified. So that's just crazy. They put the ball on the ground 8 times and then threw 2 interceptions, one of which got nullified. And we still couldn't win, you know. A missed extra point, a missed field goal, a blocked field goal, and it was just right there for the taking. Right there for the taking. Run the clock down to 3 seconds, center the ball. In comes Polino. Game over, right? Time to go to bed. No. The guy jumps over the line unblocked and then jumps again, and, well, we all know what happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and also the incredible goal line stand by the defense. You know, they run the guy down when he's going to score a touchdown, tackle him at the 1-yard line, and then 4 straight plays, SMU cannot punch it in the end zone. Amazing. You know, fantastic defensive stand. All of this for what? So we can lose a heartbreaker in overtime. And, you know, and then the 2-point conversion effort at the end, questionable. You know, should we have kicked a 4th time with Todd to tie it up and go to double overtime? I understand, you know, going for it, trying to win it and put it away. Questionable call there, you know, possible pass interference against SMU only adds to the heartbreak and the injustice of it all. So, yeah, we died 1,000 deaths on that football field, and it makes me wonder, you know, how they're going to rebound, if at all, going into Miami this Saturday.
I will say that in overtime, with Todd having basically like 3 whiffs or just something bad happens when Todd Polino comes out to the field. When SMU scored, and they scored pretty easily in overtime, when that happened, I thought to myself, if Duke scores here and you're Manny Diaz, if I was Manny Diaz, I absolutely would have gone for 2.
Yeah,
simply because
I wasn't mad either at the time.
Yeah. Like, because that game was just going so poorly, I think, that you were like, we just got to end this football game right now. Like, win or lose, this game needs to end on this snap, basically. And, well, it did. Yes. And like you mentioned, the pass interference, I think, was definitely there. I think that it is more uncommon for the officials to call a pass interference on a final play like that. Like, they're more likely to swallow their whistle. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that they're a lot more likely to swallow the whistle on that play, so you can't always bank on them calling it. And, well, they didn't. So, yet another thing gone awry. But like you mentioned, the defense played just outstanding. And we talked about it last week, right? The defense is been a consistent, and it's been something that has carried Duke week in and week out. And then the offense is just kind of fallen short. And, I mean, I don't know. I didn't think it was even possible that you could fall short that many times. But they did. They sure did. And one of the times, I think one of the most notable plays of the game that gets washed away a little bit throughout all of the craziness at the end is an instance in which Malik Murphy ran the ball for probably the first time in his entire life. And he picked up, 7 yards, and then he slides down 2 yards short of a first down with no one even remotely near him. And that I think that typifies what the offense has been the whole year, and kind of what the problem's been with Malik Murphy this whole year. And it's just like, well, how are you supposed to win these close games every time you're in them when your defense is just laying it all out on the line, but your quarterback's going to slide down 2 yards short of a first with no one near him, you know?
He obviously needs to practice his sliding a little bit. He did have a good game. I mean, compared to previous games, it was probably his best game overall. But the offense did not deliver in the clutch. They had the ball 3 times in the fourth quarter. They were on, SMU's side of the field due to turnovers, and they kept getting handed the ball. Like, here you go, try again, try and win this game again. And the play calling, I think, was not the best. Some people felt like the third time when we got the ball down at the 13-yard line that we really should have gone for the jugular instead of running it 3 times and trying to center the ball for Todd. So
Yeah.
a lot of missed opportunities for sure. Some signs of life. It'll be very interesting because, Miami is like first or second best offense in the country. And our defense is for real. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, you talked about questionable play calls, and the last thing I wanna talk about in that field house, there were multiple instances with like a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 or maybe a 3rd and 2 where Duke decided let's pass instead of just giving the ball to Star Thomas, and that to me was just sort of like what are you doing when you do that multiple times? Like if you have like a third and 1 or a 3rd and 2 and multiple times in a row, you decide to air that out and not give it to your running back, who I think clearly has the ability, especially if you give him 2 chances, he's going to pick up a yard. And that just seems like I don't know, man. Those were absolute head scratchers, and those are the types of decisions that just can't happen against Miami. Like I think a few weeks ago, I really thought that Duke had a chance at beating Miami here. Now, I mean, I don't think they're ultimately going to lose to Miami necessarily, but I don't feel as good about it. 1 and 2, I don't know if there's a point anymore. I mean, you get a better bowl game, but like if they had beat SMU, there was a chance still that Duke could find its way, weasel its way, if you will, into the ACC championship game still with a win against Miami. That's out the window. That's thrown out the window at this point. And so it's like, yeah, they can beat Miami, but I think that the real test is Duke too dejected after that game to bounce back and beat a top 5 team on the road?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that either. It's the team could go either way. It was such a devastating defeat. Is it going to galvanize them, or are they going to be still reeling emotionally and just go down in flames in Miami and try and regroup after that? So it's an open question. I really don't know how they're going to react. Certainly the other 3 games that follow are much more winnable, and they could still, end up 9-3. Virginia Tech, NC State, and Wake, I think, are after that. So yeah, but I have the same kind of queasy feeling. I wouldn't blame them at all if they went down to Miami and still had an emotional hangover.
Yeah, no, I think that would be totally understandable. I think at the very least, this team, can end up with, I mean, at least 8 wins on the season, but nine's still definitely in play, and so I haven't lost all faith in this Duke football team yet, but it's so difficult to see a season where, like, I know they could be 8-0 right now so easily. This could be an undefeated team that everybody talks about. There's 4 teams right now in the ACC that are still undefeated in ACC play, and that's the first time that's happened with like 4 entering November. And it's like, well, Duke should be one of them. It should be Duke and not SMU, because they're just a couple of plays away from that being a reality. But maybe that's just being a Duke football fan.
In some ways, it's the polar opposite of being a Duke basketball fan. You know, you have a clear expectation of winning with the basketball program, and then you have PTSD with the football program where you're like, oh my God, did that just happen again? You know, and you consider psychological counseling might be in order to try and recover from that.
Man, checks and balances. That's what life's about, and that's what being a fan of Duke athletics is about. You can't win in everything, right? You got to win some, lose some, and that's life. But as always, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Sorry we're a little bit late on this one. Hopefully we will be right on time with the coverage of the main game, and with it some coverage of that Miami football game as well. And that episode should hopefully be coming to you on Tuesday. Thanks so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you're listening. Follow Duke Wisdom on Instagram and Twitter, and we will talk to you guys later.